Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to another installment of Show to View with Mike G, the show of life, the show of cooking, the show of beat, Bobby Flay, the national, but mostly about Mezcal. Today's guest is the brilliant Danny Mena of Hecho en Dumbo and Lonteria. As a chef, as a businessman, and one of the founders of Mezcales de Leyenda, a brilliant collection of multi-state mezcals that you can find at your local mezcaleria. We talk about life, we talk about creativity, and everything in between while sitting at the beautiful Suerte in Austin, Texas. So without further ado, I hope you guys enjoy this great chat with Danny Mena.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing because growing up in Mexico, I had some friends who were in a band, everybody was singing. And I can't draw, I can't sing, I couldn't play an instrument, I took drums for a little bit, and it was just pure mathematics, and I'm good at math, you know what I mean? And the way I played the drum was just no, it was just 1, 2,
4 on the floor is the greatest thing for you. Yeah.
And so, when I went to engineering school, I went to school actually Virginia Tech,
right?
Virginia Tech, yeah. And then I decided that I wanted to kind of go into culinary school, and that kind of became my artistic outlet. And I've loved music. In high school, I mean, I got into where I, hundreds and hundreds of CDs and just go down rabbit holes of these different bands.
Anybody particularly influential for you?
I love Tortoise and Jessamine, and so even record labels like Cranky and Thrill Jockey, Matador. Really got into some more esoteric stuff that now is a little more common. But at the time, and in Mexico, I had one good friend that kind of was kind of got me into Sonic Youth and a little bit into Polvo and Pavement, and I got my mixtape, and some of these songs were just
it's. I mean, because I think we're maybe similar in age, so I think we kind of went through. The bands were similar, probably.
Yeah, probably.
Do you hear Pavement's finally doing a reunion tour?
Are they doing something?
They've been talking about this for 10 years, and they're finally coming back. Steve Malcolm was like, okay, fine.
We all want it, man.
Dude, we totally do, because now we got money. We didn't have money then, right?
It's now I'll pay the $70 for the tickets.
You want a shirt? I'll buy 2 shirts. Well, I'll find somebody to keep it.
Yeah, of course.
But it is an interesting trajectory for you growing up in Mexico City, yeah?
Yeah.
Where in Mexico City were you?
So it's called in the northwest part of the city, Huixquilucan. So.
Okay. And you, at that point, as the story goes, ate the same thing every day. Didn't think about. You thought about perhaps how efficient it was as an engineer, right? But not how to enjoy it.
But it wasn't even. It was just my lack of interest in experimenting.
Yeah.
It really was always very I like what I like, and I didn't want anything else, and that was it. And my parents babied me enough that they put up with my shenanigans and said okay. So that I used to go visit my aunt 2 hours south.
Yeah.
Every time I go, it was the same food. Now I go back and visit, and they still serve me the same food. I was like, please, no more this, breaded beef cutlet that's milanesa. No more milanesa. It's I love it, but you have such good cuisine, and you cook so. My aunt is just an amazing cook.
Yeah.
And I was give me some of the stuff that you really are good at, and
but that would have worked back in the day. But now,
all, of course, and
the mind
went
has expanded.
Yeah.
So you. How about this? So you had a good stint in academics, right? So as a high school student or whatnot, still very drawn to math, very drawn to, and probably not engineering at that point.
Not really engineering, but just math, science, just kind of that type of way of thinking. I think was not a good writer, never have been, and
which is funny because you have a book coming out, right?
I have a book coming out, but I'm the author, not the writer, which is an amazing thing that those things exist. And so a good friend of mine named Niels Bernstein is an amazing writer. And I pretend like I do some writing, and I put together a paragraph, an intro,
a foreword. The forewords by you, right? Yeah.
Well, and then he would make it make it half as long and twice as as interesting, and that's great to the point. And it's just that's another art, I mean, and my wife's a really good writer, and is an English teacher and knows about that. What's up?
She's an English teacher.
She's an English teacher,
that's great. So a bit opposite attract kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
I like that.
Yeah, she's from Cincinnati, Ohio. So
is that how you know the National?
Yeah, through her, of course.
No
yeah,
kidding.
And and that's why I know where they're from.
Yeah.
It's like, that she has this, like, it's like you really like them just because they're from Cincinnati. You don't even know if you really like the music that much. She's like, no.
It's an uphill battle in Cincinnati, man. Who gets out of there?
I know. There's like, and then the fact that they kind of came together, I think, in Brooklyn. So kind of both those places are near and dear to her.
Yeah. So, was there any expectation about the academic piece? So, rather, what were your? And I know your folks separated, divorced later on, but what were they doing for a living?
So my mom was a teacher.
Oh,
also.
Okay. Which subjects? All subjects, or?
She was a first grade teacher.
Okay.
First grade teacher, and then my dad worked in the government. So he was like an economist.
Yeah. No way.
And so then he worked at banks for a little bit, and then he worked a lot with like different sectors in the government. So the way it kind of works in Mexico is because it's very political party focused.
Yeah.
So he had his boss that was basically part of his team. So anytime a new party came in or a new boss was hired, you basically fired the entire team that was there, and then they bring in their entire team.
So it's kind of like the White House in a way. And I'm not saying that critically, but
exactly.
that's kind of how
how kind of it is. Yeah.
Oh.
So, but in every sector within it, and so then his boss would get fired, and it was only a matter of like time before he got fired, and then you just kind of wait.
Yeah.
And then his boss would get hired, and you kind of follow this group around, and and then little by you find other jobs and stuff like that. But it's very, very much so right now. Like in Mexico, because of the change of political party, there's like the pre is huge turnover. So a lot of my friends, their parents are pre and all that, and like this party is like dead in the water, and everyone's just trying to figure out and hold on until see what happens in like 6 or 12 or 18 years, but it's gonna be a while. So,
did you travel a bit as a kid?
Normal. Yeah. Normal. So in Mexico, we'd always take one trip to go, and we drive to like Veracruz or Oaxaca or Guerrero, and we go in Cuautla, but we never. I didn't really like when I graduated from high school. We did like a 6-week European tour with my friends.
Oh, nice.
So that's when we kind of went around and got to really experience a whole nother world.
Sure.
But other than that, I never left Mexico or the United States growing up. Like it was just those two places. So it was
I'll go on a limb here maybe, but having a father who's an economist or in economics, probably some academic background, right?
Yeah.
I imagine maybe multiple degrees, which I think is required of that profession.
Yeah, I mean, he did that, and then he actually got his master's at the New School in New York, so they moved to New York for a few years.
No way.
And so he...
Were you already out of the house at that point?
No, this was before I was even born.
Oh, I got you. Okay.
Not even a sparkle in my dad's eye.
But the New York water was running through him.
It was interesting. So they went. So my dad, liked the Mets, and it was like these things that there was always like this that he had to love. And so my mom's American, my dad's Mexican. My mom moved to Mexico to learn Spanish. Met my dad. So my mom's from like a small little town in the United States, and my dad's from a small little town in Mexico. Like complete opposite. Like my blonde hair, blue eyes. Like now she got into her family tree, and like basically on the Mayflower, her family came over.
Holy shit, that's crazy.
And then my dad is as Mexican as they come.
As the day is long.
I mean, it's crazy how like they met, and then they got married in Mexico, and then they moved to the U.S. And my dad didn't speak one word of English.
Yeah.
So he worked as a mechanic at a place called Grease Monkey. And he learned English enough that he even went to. Then they moved to New York, and he got his master's there in the New School.
Dude, that's brilliant.
So
that drive, that kind of ambition, or like that adaptability. Do you think you got that too?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, it's funny because now I really appreciate kind of what he did and how hard it was to even to go to a country without speaking the language. So growing up, we always spoke English in my house because he didn't want to forget his English. Because in Mexico, obviously, we're going to speak Spanish. TV's in Spanish,
no matter what,
Spanish,
right?
no matter what. But because of that, he wanted to continue to because language is so hard. As soon as you stop using it, it goes away.
Well, and I'm going through that right now too because Spanish is. I hear it all the time, thankfully. And I just got back from Juarez this past weekend.
Okay.
And oddly enough, the love of my life, her father was an economist in Guadalajara, and then he left and opened up Club 15 in Juarez.
Okay.
Which is a crazy bar, but what I realized is that. To be immersed in it and to be kind of almost like immobilized by it because I just have to pay attention. I'm like, okay, that get that.
Mm-hmm.
That was the most effective Spanish had ever been for me.
Yeah. Because
you have to just keep hearing it, keep remembering it. So the same thing goes, I guess, with English, of course.
For sure. But I mean, both languages, you have to continually so when I came to the U.S., I went to school at Virginia Tech.
Yeah.
There's no Hispanics in Virginia Tech. There's no Mexicans. There's nothing. You mean? So for like 4 or 5 years, really, I used very little Spanish. And then being in New York and working in the kitchen, I barely speak English some days. You know what I mean? So it was interesting that you start forgetting words like a belt buckle, things that you don't use on a regular basis.
Yeah, right.
And all of a sudden, so you have what they term pocho, which is like half English, half Spanish. And it just becomes part of it. And because all my friends are bilingual, growing up, we went to the American school in Mexico, and so they're all Mexicans, but at any time you couldn't think of a word, you just say it in the other language, and no one thought even twice about it because it was. And so like when they graduated from high school and they went to like ITAM and Tech and all these like Mexican universities, they were blown away with also how improper their kind of Spanish or just like incomplete.
Yeah,
that it was also for them like you have to. And so I really strive very hard right now that when I speak a language to speak only in that language. And it's tough.
It is tough, but I admire that. And I tell you one of the reasons as we'll talk about Mezcal of course here in a moment, but one of the reasons I feel it's not uncomfortable going to Mexico, I never feel uncomfortable being around people because I appreciate it and the culture and all that. But what I feel unfair about is me expecting the mezcalero to tell me in my language what he does in his way. And I felt like it was the greatest disrespect I paid to these guys, no matter how many Palenques I've been to, right?
Yeah.
So that was it. That was finally the impetus for it. And I'm like, I have to know.
Of course.
And so, but I feel like we don't revere the other cultures or the king of Wales, right? Which just dropped today, right? Anyway, that's a joke, but
of course. But no, I mean it's funny. So yesterday was Brooklyn Bar Convent, and or Bar Convent Brooklyn, and there were these, and everybody has their badges and it says kind of where you're from and everything.
Yeah.
So these guys were from Belgium. I could speak in French, so I said we, and I said a couple words in French, and they're like, oh, and they were like so like blown away that like there was an effort to try to, and everywhere I go, like I went on my honeymoon to Turkey.
Yeah.
And I was like, I know nothing of this language, so I bought like a little book, and like I was like studying so I could do a couple sentences.
Yeah.
And because I'm kind of dark skinned and I learned to say merhaba in a very, I think, proper accent, that I come in and say like merhaba, which is hello.
Yeah.
And then people would just like start at it. It's like, oh, no, I'm so sorry. It's like I really don't speak any Turkish. I know like 3 words. I know how to order a beer. I know how to order this. I'm going to say thank you. Hello, goodbye.
Dude.
But they appreciate it, like, and if you're going to be part of the culture, if you're getting into mezcal and stuff like that, well, then you really have to learn all about it, and it's something that we've kind of.
It's the ultimate respect.
I think so.
So food comes into your life. You were doing private parties or events at Virginia Tech.
Just at my home, yeah.
Just at your house, right?
Just at my house, and so it was like making like sopes, which is like a very typical kind of Mexican like street food, and it was like people would come over, and it was just, and I didn't even at that time I still didn't enjoy eating as much as I enjoyed cooking.
Interesting. So like the process?
Just the process and like and the hosting and like that most of the times when you're and I think this is true for most chefs that when you're cooking you really don't eat.
Great point. Yeah.
I mean that I think I come home every time from work when I used to be on the line a lot and I'm like I'm starving. My wife's like you've been around food all day long. I was like I know but like I'm working. I'm not there's this weird like and so and now I enjoy eating more than cooking but for a long time I mean it was just that whole the social aspect and getting people together and they were experiencing the food and talking and, and of course drinking and everything. And the constantly, at that time I couldn't cook without drinking. Like that was hand in hand.
Yeah.
Then when I went to culinary school and everything, it became so serious for me that I couldn't drink when I was cooking. I was like, we're cooking, we're working here. And then after that, then now I've come to a nice balance, I think. But
it does, man, because it drink too much, eat too much. But it's like, well, okay, no, there's somewhere right in the middle that's a nice compromise. Was there a moment then when you were doing these kind of bits at your house and hosting people that you're like, I mean, this engineering thing is I got to do something.
So I was getting more into it. I went to school at Virginia Tech, which didn't have anything really related to, hospitality. They had hospitality and tourism management.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, I want to change to that major, because of all the classes I had taken. This was my junior year. That I would have taken 3 more years. And so I was like, but I was still going to do it. So I called my mom and I was like, this is what I really want to do. And she's like, do what you feel is best. And then I called my dad and he was like, don't be an asshole. Finish your career, finish your, engineering. And then after that, then you can do whatever you want. But you have that foundation, you have that.
The same conversation I had. Yeah.
Which I think he was right.
Did you finish up then?
So I was like, I'm not going to study for my finals, for my junior year. And if I pass, I move on. And if I don't pass, I make my change.
Oh, I love it.
And I passed, which I don't know how. No. And I didn't study for finals, so it's kind of. And then, so that was the end of my junior year, and so I only had 1 year left. So then my senior year, by then it's kind of you're doing your projects, and it was fine. And there was enough about it that I liked.
Yeah.
So when I finished, I still went into I moved back to Mexico for a little while, and then I got a job in North Carolina where I interned before and worked as an engineer. And then I was like, okay, what am I doing here? So then I moved to New York because I was like, I still can go to culinary school.
Absolutely.
But then at the same time, I can also. I can kind of pursue. So I worked as like an engineer, and I worked for a diamond company in New York.
No way.
And so I kind of learned that, and I didn't like the politics, and there's a certain aspect that I like, and now that like having a mezcal company, there's a lot of like production side and things like that. I studied industrial engineering, which is all this, so, and it's a way of thinking that like I love the idea that I can get back into it, and in work both sides and do it exactly.
Yeah, that's great.
And so it was kind of when I got to New York and I realized that I read Kitchen Confidential, and it was one of those that I was like, I think I'm gonna do this.
Yeah. So
I got a loan and went to culinary school in the evening, worked during the day, and it was like the best 9 months of my life.
Man,
it was just so interesting, like just so much fun. And it was like 25, and it was just like
perfect time to do
perfect time. A little money saved up from North Carolina, so I was living in New York, my apartment. Like it was just like, it was just.
Dude, it's a sweet spot.
It is.
That's when you write a book, right?
Yeah.
You bought that sweet. I think that's Kitchen Confidential era for Tony, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I think so. And so that's when, gosh, in Texas, people they settle down, have kids and stuff, but like that's the prime time to go live.
Yeah.
And I love that. There's like this twinkle in your eyes as you kind of think about this nostalgia related to it. Okay. So here's, any wonderful passion. It's easy to work for someone else. Maybe they're assholes or stuff, but that you just deal with that, right? Because it's about the trade and the craft, and you just appreciate it. But you took it a step further, and you're like, no, I'm at my own restaurant now. And was this 2007 or
2007?
When
2008.
Okay.
2008.
First restaurant.
So I went to culinary school, worked for like had like a little internship at Blue Hill, but then really worked at the Modern and learned about that. And then my partner in the restaurants, who was a friend at the time, him and I were talking about doing a taco truck. And this was the idea that it was going to be really stylish. So before like trucks were a thing, we were thinking about doing this, and it was going to be super stylish and decked out. I was like, we'll make all our tortillas from scratch and like really do like things properly, because Mexican food in New York was still lacking a lot then.
I bet.
It's not ingrained in the culture. I mean, the amount of Mexican restaurants that are just on the street.
Yeah.
Well,
like Texas is a different deal.
Texas is a different deal. But I mean, so as much as there is good Mexican food in New York, there isn't a culture that you see in California, Chicago, Texas. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, absolutely.
So like we just have a lot of restaurants, so inevitably you're going to find stuff. But it's not like you can't go to the store and find a good tortilla. You have to really seek them out.
Dude,
and like
queso fresco, cotija, like all this stuff. But we were very lucky. We have Fiesta. I don't know if you've ever been to that grocery store.
No.
It is very Mexican ingredient focused.
I went to one in San Diego, and I was like, God, New York needs one of those.
Yeah, exactly. And you find all these kinds of chilies and stuff. You're like, oh shit, I didn't realize this even cascabel. Fresh, really? Anyway. So, you found the opportunity.
So we found the opportunity. So we talked about doing this, and then I realized that I was going to be like the asshole on the truck. And like my partner, like you always need somebody with a Department of Health certificate. And I was like, I went to culinary school. I like the idea of this. I really don't want to spend like the movie Chef, like what I mean. No one really wants to spend all his day on the truck. You know what I mean? Like
agreed.
So so we decided to kind of put that. I was like, this too much is falling on me, and that my two partners that were going to kind of be there, like, you guys don't cook, so you're not going to really be there, and I at all. So my partner at the time was working at a coffee shop, because he's like a screenwriter, and that's what he wanted to focus. So it was was just in the industry by necessity, but because he really focused on his craft. And then there was this we had a liquor license, and he went to the owner and it's like, we should do something else here. And so they tried to do the bar, and it was a big open space. So because there was no one there, no one would come in. It was this kind of catch-22.
Yeah, it looks empty, even though it's probably not. Yeah,
exactly. And so it's like, we need a food element, but we can make a little more of a restaurant. And at that time, because I kind of quit my job to do the taco truck, and then I went to go work and understand a little bit about bread baking, and I really wanted to kind of get into that. We did a proposal to the owner and said, and at the time, the term pop-up didn't even exist. So we called it a reoccurring culinary event. Didn't catch on the name.
A little wordy, but
it
works.
And so she's like, sure. So Thursday, Friday, Saturday, I did all the cooking in my house. I'd bring it to the restaurant. At 6 p.m., they would shut down. At 7 p.m. So we opened the restaurant at 7 o'clock at night.
Man.
And at 7 o'clock, we do that. And then it was just him and me.
Oh, that's great.
For like 6 months.
Was it a visceral, like super amazing experience, kind of engaging with these people and doing all your...
It was amazing. I mean, like, so many people had the people that got it and liked it, and it's like you can tell that you cook with love. And I was like, I've never been to a restaurant where I felt that.
Yeah.
Much less how you impart that just making a taco. You know what I mean? But I wanted to do food that I know and I love, and that was not seen really in New York.
Yeah.
So we made all of our tortillas in house and things like that. That now, it's commonplace
if you
everywhere.
Don't do it.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
But back then it didn't exist.
That's crazy.
There was no, and so like there was in New York there was kind of the really cheap mom and pop shops that had good seasoning, but not good ingredients.
Great.
You know what I mean? Not a good
point,
place. Not a place that not like where we're sitting right now. That's beautiful. And then there were the really fancy places that were good, chef driven, but lost the touch of, a little bit of grease coming out down your hands as you ate a taco. You know what I mean? Like a little bit of that heart that exists.
Too refined.
Too refined.
Yeah.
Too refined, and it has its place. But it's not like, let's go get some good Mexican food. Like there really wasn't like a kind of a day-to-day place, like a neighborhood sort of joint that was doing things right. And that was kind of what we wanted to do. And so little by little, kind of people noticed, and I, was the back of the house by myself. So I washed all the dishes, I cooked everything, did everything by myself. And my partner did everything on the front of the house. And
did you think it was a good balance for you?
It was a good balance. It was funny. I always joke with him because at the end of the night when we closed up, and we went at kind of late night, so we always stayed open until 1 a.m.
Yeah.
And at first we started off and we were probably selling a couple $100 in a day. Like it was a very slow sort of, and we were young, we had energy, and so it was okay.
Yeah.
But like at 1 o'clock, it was like, okay, time to close up. And it would take me literally an hour, no matter how much I got everything ready, an hour to like clean up everything, sweep and mop.
Yeah.
And my partner, all he had to do was like count the money and like close up the drawer, and it would take him 1 hour too. And I was like, I feel like you're dragging your feet a little bit, so you don't help me like wash the toilet at the end of the night. Like I feel like this is an unfair balance. And so, but he was a good hard worker, so I knew it wasn't. Like it was always like kind of a little joke.
Yeah.
But it was nice to experience everything and understand a little more of that when you get to a certain place and you start hiring people and you start managing.
Yeah.
You say, I've done that. I've done that before. I can do that. I know how hard it is to wash dishes, and I know how easy it is to. Like let's not complain about certain things that aren't necessary.
But you wouldn't know unless you knew.
Exactly.
So you paid your dues ultimately, right?
Yeah, in a sense, like definitely for the restaurant, like we worked really hard, and so after about a year, we had a good write up, and all of a sudden the restaurant was, and so that's where I met David Suro, who and somebody introduced me to him, and they're like, David Suro's like, oh, he owns a tequila. I was like, oh, great, another tequila. Like, no clue what he was. He came in, he ate a little bit of food, he liked the food, and and so I guess maybe he saw something and kind of started taking care of us, and I knew nothing of tequila, I knew nothing of the liquor industry.
Wow.
That we were like, he's like, there's diffusers and column stills, and none of that meant anything to me. Like I had no, in Mexico we drank, like I drank rum and cokes and like...
Yeah, not stuff that was native to ultimately...
Not native to Mexico, yeah. and not enough even care of how, it's agave, it comes from tequila, you know what I mean? Like that's tequila, okay. And gin, it's gin.
Yeah.
I have no clue what botanicals they were in there or any, like there was really no knowledge. And this was obviously in the 90s in Mexico.
Yeah.
No one did.
Yeah, exactly. So to think how far we've come, just to say that much, dude, it's crazy, right?
It's crazy. So he was kind of like and so he was little by little kind of helping us and like explaining to us about like tequila and the different like processes.
Yeah.
And like, so we did a paired dinner with like tequilas, and we came up. And even at the time, to me, I thought pairing liquor with food was a little bit too intense. And David Suro's pal, of course, had already gone well past that and was ready to consume both and understand it. But I was down for it, like, and little by little, like all these sort of things have been the path that kind of leads us to where we are.
Man, he's been a mentor. To take time to kind of reflect on some of these folks, right? Like David, which we were talking about the Marfa Agave Festival or Agave Marfa Festival, whatever, and he was there, and just to think about what he exudes in terms of love and knowledge. He never judges. He speaks with truth, and he's always there to help. And I feel like that is one of the principal pillars of Mezcal. Sharing truth.
Yeah.
Finding
your journey. I mean, when we asked him about it's like, certain processes that he didn't agree with, but he never told us like this brand no, this brand yes, this brand no.
Exactly.
He was just like, and then finally like, I can't find any information. Can let me know.
Yeah.
Diffuser or not diffuser, please just tell me. But he rarely would ever say anything because he was always like, this is your journey, this is your path. And if you like this, if you like that, then it's, you know what I mean? Right now, somebody here in Texas we have a new brand ambassador who's helping us out. And so we have mezcals from Oaxaca and other states. Where in Oaxaca, I mean, I was going to say 9 out of 10, but probably 9,999 out of 10,000 are Tahona crushed.
Right.
And everybody in Oaxaca uses Tahona. In Guerrero, almost nobody uses a Tahona. In Durango, almost no one uses a Tahona.
Yeah.
So and now traditional mezcal is made using a small little mill.
Yeah.
And so Michoacan, same thing. You know what I mean? And so So we're like, well, how can you call this artisanal if you're not using a tahona? And I was
Dude,
like,
come on.
I know. But it's so easy to like criticize instead of like, well, I mean, if artisanal it should be clay, then we can't use anything with copper because that's, obviously the Spanish influence. And if we're talking about real typical mezcal, then it all has to be like.
Right. So this is a great point. And now let's talk about mezcal and this journey. But to the point of Pedro, who we were talking about, Jimenez, he said, it doesn't matter what do they call it. Is mezcal? Fine. Raicilla? Fine. That's what they call it. Don't try to call that Raicilla mezcal. It's called tepe or it's tuchi. So use the words that they use and stop taking basically what is a very American kind of perspective. And I'm not saying you and I necessarily have that. But putting those glasses on and being like, well, but that's what artisanal means. It's copper or Tahona crush.
Yeah.
Bullshit. Because everybody does it different. And if it's been a cultural artifact to make mezcal for eons, let them fucking do it how they're going to do it. Anyway, that's the bit of the soapbox thing. Yeah. But where did you start? Because this tequila, because it starts with tequila, I think.
It also starts with tequila.
Expands out into the nuance and the vivid colors of the different cultures of mezcal. Yeah. So I know you had a very mezcal forward menu at one of your spots, right?
Yeah, I mean, the one that we have current now is very mezcal forward. But, I mean, when we started off, so like with Hecho en Dumbo, of course we had tequila. And it was interesting. So when we took over this kind of pop-up, there was leftover horrible garbage tequila.
Yeah.
And so we were like, oh, well, we'll do a happy hour and we'll kind of get rid of this. And they were so bad, the margaritas, that people were like, I'd rather pay full price and get good tequila than this crap that you're selling. So it just stayed there. We're like, okay, fine, we're not going to get rid of it because I don't want to sell it. And I was like, if I'm doing really good food, there's no reason why you shouldn't do really good drinks.
Right. You can't have a good band with a shitty drummer.
Exactly.
You just can't. It's a backbone.
100%. And so we started using Los Danzantes as a mezcal. I mean, at that time, there was 3 or 4 brands. Los Danzantes we knew kind of from Mexico and everything, and it was just a beautiful mezcal. And so we did our cocktails with that. And at that point, rent was cheap. We didn't know a whole. I thought it fit the price point that we were like, okay.
Yeah, right.
And so we started off with Herradura for tequila and Los Danzantes for mezcal. We're two
simple
kind of
beginnings.
Yeah. And we started learning about mezcal and everything, and then of course learning through like David Suro with tequila. But so my 2 partners had opened up the first mezcal bar in Mexico City called La Botica.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So that was their. That's how they got started. And so my partner in one of my restaurants right now is a friend at the time, and Isel, who works with us. We go down to Mexico. It's like, oh, we went to, and everybody called that Mezcaleria.
Uh-huh.
So we went down to Mezcaleria and learned about that and blah, blah, blah. And I never had gone until later, but of course I'd heard about it and then through a friend of a friend, these 2 guys started the line Mezcales de Leyenda, and they were looking to get into the U.S. market.
So it existed in Mexico before. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Same bottle and everything at that point?
Same bottle. I mean, the exact same mold of the bottle. Like,
got it, okay.
There was no, we had no brand name. Like, it was just etched on in the glass.
I see.
So they had it just by the names of the animals. So even to this day, if you go to Mexico, if you ask for like Mezcal de Leyenda, chances are they're not going to know it. But if you say, give me a Nayaca or a Tlacuache, they'll know that.
Oh, dude, I had no idea. That's crazy.
So it's really interesting to see how they, how kind of not knowing any, it was more like, we're talking about mezcal. We're like, my partner loved animals, and we'll kind of, find a good way to name them in interesting ways to give some character. But really, in a marketing sense, we lost brand identity. So now it's like we have to keep reminding people it's called Mezcal de Leyenda. You want to buy a store, like it is a business that. So these guys, I talked to them on the phone. I was like, I know nothing of, and if I at the time thought I knew nothing, what I really knew was.
Beyond nothing.
And so I was like, I know nothing of mezcal, I know nothing of the liquor industry, and I know even less about importing a product. But I love Mexico, and the only thing I can say about myself is that I'm a hard worker.
Yeah.
So I was like, you know what? So I flew down to Mexico. I went to Guerrero. I met our producer there. For a little while, they decided to build a bottling plant and just like in Chilpancingo, in Guerrero. Because we have a mezcal from Durango, one from Oaxaca, one from Guerrero. It was kind of like
central.
Right? Yeah. So they thought it would make sense to go there. But they never used it, and it was just too far away. They're from Mexico City, so there's no point.
Gotcha.
But I went to go see that, and then it was like, okay. And then in Guerrero, they call distilleries, not palenques, they call them fábricas, factories. So it's like, okay, let's go look at this factory. So I'm expecting to see, and also there's Don Chucho, which is like a 70-year-old man, 2 fermentation tanks, a hole in the ground, and the still, and so the fermentation tanks weren't even being used, so it's got like, stagnant water that's in there, and it's kind of gross, and like, I was like, what is this, man? Like
my engineering spidey senses.
This is something's really weird here. And so and we drank some mezcal, and I was like, God, this is delicious. I love this. I mean, that producer, which no longer, he retired probably 10 years ago.
Oh, really?
So shortly after. But we still use this. We rent his distillery because it's magical, where just the yeast that are there.
Sure.
But he had a touch. I mean, it was like, that Guerrero mezcal was just really mind-blowing.
Do you still have some of it from his tenure?
No.
Man,
no, we don't have any. Someone, Neil's the guy who helped me with the cookbook.
Yeah.
Also, he showed me a picture that he has a bottle from him. But because we use corks, natural cork, I imagine we're going to lose a lot angel share.
That's right.
And I don't know if it's going to be a valid, like, had it been completely, closed off and being very airtight, it would have been a better example. So I don't know. Like, I had some that was like 7 or 8 year old bottles of our mezcal that were kind of been open and closed.
Yeah.
And they were just so flat.
It's not the same. Flat's a great word for it.
And so I was like,
man, it starts somewhere. It always does, right?
It starts somewhere, man.
So you said 10 years ago now?
So 10 years ago, we've been in the United States. So in 2008, so then I talked to David Sura. I was like, so how do I do this? You know what I mean? So he introduced me to some people. And it was funny because when we first got started, we were talking about Tito's. And it was already what Tito's is now and what they were 10 years ago was very different thing. Yeah. But even then, 10 years ago, it was already kind of on the map. You know what I mean? It's a slow progression, even though it's quick. It's not, it takes time.
Scheme of things,
but like it's since I've been around, like, Tito's has been something which is interesting. And so like he gave me a lawyer, and we looked into that and like found out about like importing and whether we can distribute it and learning all the things. And so finally we found our importer. It was like a record in Pennsylvania. We found a little distributor in New York called the Little Wine Company. They had like 3 or 4 salespeople. And then little by little we got into one state and we got into another state. And it was just really like going from account to account, from person to person, tasting mezcal and talking about, like, Ron Cooper did a lot for the category here in the United States.
Absolutely.
And there was something that like people knew about mezcal when we got there. But I was talking to Arik from Fidencio Mezcal. It's like when him and I started, because we started our brand in Mexico before he did, but then he got into the U.S. like I think a year before we. There was probably less than 10 brands in the whole market.
Not crazy.
I mean, it was like there was one moment when because we have a mezcal called Pelotón de la Muerte, which Vida, his Fidencio Clásico, and Pelotón de la Muerte were completely out of stock in New York. So literally, like, there was no priced mezcal for a cocktail at that point. Like, it was completely dry. That now there's so many brands.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that, like,
how do you feel about this is great for me because I knew you'd been a part of this industry for a long time, but I didn't realize that Leanda had been around 10 years already, which is in the States, which is remarkable. And it finally, to me, is becoming even more powerful, even more visible. But given that the market has increased in terms of those marks, dude, it's been super saturated, which has other downfalls. But just from as a business owner, how do you feel about the growth of the category in itself?
I think it's fantastic. I mean, it's obviously like, there was an article that Esteban and I had the same quote, and what the writer was trying to say was something that I didn't agree with. And basically it was for the New York Times, and it was talking about mezcal, and it's kind of either it was like the subtitle or the final sentence was like, drink mezcal but not too much.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, drink as much mezcal as you want to,
Yeah, right.
Like, I'm not advocating alcoholism, but but you should not be limiting your mezcal consumption because you're worried about a producer or you're worried about the agave. Like the blue agave, they didn't plant enough 5 years ago. They didn't plant enough 3 years ago. The pricing is going up. The people that plant it and are selling agave are making a lot of money.
Absolutely.
The people that are producing mezcal are paying a higher price, and they have a choice to either consumer pays it, we absorb the cost. Like no one is being forced. There's no indentured servants. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's
business, man.
It's business. And so and if people and white people, like we've seen it with tequila over the decades of how the price goes up and down and up and down because a plant that takes 7 to 10 years to reach maturity.
Yeah.
And you don't know what the demand is going to be in 10 years from now. And so everyone right now is planting because there's a lot of money. The price is going up. And then all of a sudden the price starts to go down, and then people stop planting.
Same thing. It's just economics, right?
It's economics. And so it's kind of like, so that idea to me of what mezcal is, that like, when I was just thinking about, like, really for Del Maguey and Ron Cooper, it was a very smart transition from tequila to what he was selling at the time, which now they've expanded their portfolio. But it was all Espadín, it was all Oaxaca, and the only thing I'm talking about is Chichicapan. I'm talking about San Juan, I'm talking about Barradas. Like, it was just town to town. And this producer and that producer, but it was exactly like the same same agave, same region.
Yeah.
So you really got to kind of experience kind of terroir. And it was a very nice way to start to see a little bit of what the next thing is.
Absolutely.
And then now every brand that you see, all from Oaxaca, and they all have different types of agaves that are wild or semi-wild, and your tepestatas and your jabalís and all those sort of things. And when we started with our brand 10 years ago, our Oaxaca or Espadín was our best seller. And I was always expecting the Guerrero and the Durango, which we started off with just those three, to be a much bigger sales because it was like...
The flavor, man.
Well, of course, and you already have... and at the time, because there were so few brands, anybody that cared about mezcal would carry all of, the magueyes.
Right, yeah.
So they'd have their 8 different espadillas from different towns. And I was like, if you have any care about mezcal, you're immediately going to pick up a Guerrero Durango because that's obviously something that no one has. It's a whole new world.
Exactly, yeah.
And it was flavor profiles that people were not used to, that it takes time, even for the people that love mezcal.
Yeah.
Like right now, I was in Atlanta 6 months ago. And the reception that we had from our mezcals was the best I'd ever seen. And our mezcal producers have been making it for generations. By making it more and more, right now I think we're in a sweet spot.
Yeah.
That we're producing enough that there is more knowledge on the fermentation, the distillation.
Of course.
Even though they've been doing it for generations, they would produce 3 months a year. They come back and what are all the effects? It just takes 5 days because there's the typical thing. What they do is they cut heads. Is it's a bucket.
Yep.
And if the bucket breaks, then maybe they have a bigger bucket or a smaller bucket.
Dude, it's imprecise in a way.
Super imprecise.
Does that drive you nuts as an engineer?
No. I love it. I love that. I mean, I always make the really, really asinine question of why do you do this?
Yeah.
And I was like, because that's the way it's done, asshole.
Yeah, dude, that's it, right?
And it's
that's the best answer ever because it's always like that.
It's always like that.
And so we can look at it a little more analytically and say, well, the reason... we'll talk about this Sotal thing because I learned something crazy about it. But nonetheless, people weather change, the temperature's a variable, the size of the bucket's a variable, the type of plant's a variable, the rain, the soil, everything.
The yeast, because it's all natural yeast, and so sometimes a yeast will consume it quicker than another.
That's why it's almost like every single time it's a beautifully unique snapshot of the moment, a straight up picture, right?
Really well said. Yeah,
thanks.
Yeah, totally.
But that's it. And I love that.
Yeah. I mean, that's what it is. And so, there's a flavor, and it's really interesting, especially like the Durango, the Cenizo. It's an agave that you only really see in this region of Mexico. And so how much of the flavor is thanks to the agave? How much is it because of the yeast or the wood that they're used or the soil? All these sort of things that, there isn't enough, Pinot Noir grape. You've seen it in, you see it in Oregon, you see it in Burgundy, you see it in other places, and you know what the kind of flavor is, and then what, of course, you get from, the terroir.
Yeah.
With agave, there's not enough.
Dude, what we think we know is still only a fraction of what there is to know.
A fraction.
I love that.
Yeah.
Because everything is new. So you've got apparently a staff training here in just a few minutes, but going through these mezcals, the Puebla is my favorite.
Thank you.
And it's because it tastes unlike anything I've ever had before. But so is the Guerrero. It tastes like something I've never had before. But then so is the Durango. It's all of it, dude. And that, to me, is why mezcal is exciting. And you can hear them. They're already warming up and hooting and hollering for you.
But it is. I mean, it's this thing that the tequila is beautiful, not to knock it, but it's one agave, one region. There's only so much variance that you can get from that.
Yeah. It's the one analogy, not to talk about it, is you get a filet mignon or you buy ribeye. Which one would you pick? It's easily, right?
Easy.
Yeah, easy. So that's it. It's the flavor.
Yeah. So with that, and with that, and talking about the journey. I mean, the producers, the people, the land, the traditions, what people eat, all these sort of things that happen in every region changes a lot.
That's a
what I mean. And so every time I get to go down, I meet different producers, and I go to Durango, and we go to Michoacán, and understanding all of that. To me is I always I come back always intoxicated, and not because of the alcohol,
with knowledge,
with just knowledge, and then I always realize how little knowledge I have as well.
I love that.
I can tell you the process of mezcal perfectly, and I could, in theory, make a mezcal. I know I would kill you if I actually had the misfortune of distilling and fermenting. There's just so much that they understand and know, and why they do certain things. That just understanding when the plant is mature and how to
Dude, I like it because we can't overthink it, because no matter how much we think and we try to pin something down, it's pointless because it will always change and it'll always be mystical in another.
Yeah, and that's what like Pedro Jimenez was saying. They're like, and this is what mezcal is in this area, and this is what they do, and that's how they do it. They're like, so what we try to do with our brand is like, I don't want to change anything. Like if these guys have decided to go with a mechanical till,
fine,
great. That's what they do.
Yeah.
I mean, am I going to come in and say no? That's not the way we do it in Mexico. We have to use like.
Yeah, who's the spokesman anyway, right?
I was like, well, Mexico, I'm in Mexico, and in Durango, this is the way we do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, so it's there's a certain amount that like you have to appreciate with what they do.
Of course.
And there's going to be evolution over time, and there's going to be changes, and there's going to be some that are positive and some that are negative. And I mean, mezcal is not made now the way it was made 300 years ago.
But maybe that's okay.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
What I'm drinking now, I love. You know, I'm very happy. So like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not I think there's something that if we can, you know, help out producers. Like I'm not a big fan of the Tahona personally because
it's inefficient, man.
Well, no, and what the horse? I mean, like it's
the animal.
The animal cruelty. I mean, it's and as you get busier and busier, like this horse just goes around in a circle, you know, 10 hours a day crushing agave and trying to eat the agave because it's so delicious, and they're constantly beating it, so it won't like.
It's rough, man.
There's this like romantic idea that your producer's gonna have wrinkles and scars and like. You know, he's going to look like he's 30 years older than what he is because he's lived a hard life. And, you know, that typical black and white picture of, like, the indigenous Mexican that is, you know, beautiful. But if we could give some tools to make this life a little bit easier, shouldn't we?
Yeah.
Like, wouldn't it be better? I mean, that's the reason why this invention happens. Like, can we still make something that is traditional, delicious, something that he's proud about?
Yeah.
That doesn't, like, is not as taxing. Like, you know, we have a mezcal that's, like, all hand-crushed. And it takes 4 guys 4 days to crush this. Like... If in a mechanical till, they would do it in, you know, an hour.
That's right.
Because they're small, teeny batches. Like, yes, there's something really beautiful about it. Yes, there's something really nice. But at the same time, if that exists and we can make a mezcal that is just as good, and I think crushing is not that essential to the final flavor.
I agree. It's not. And there's been no study. It's just anecdotal.
It's just anecdotal. I've yet to taste the same mezcal. And sometimes it's really hard to taste because there's different batches. So it's like,
I know.
You know what I mean? Like... But I've yet to come and taste, and some people say yes, and the Thomas Estes says no, and
right,
like
exactly.
I've heard both. That I'm like, even if it's a little bit different, like
okay,
if it's better for him, and if he's happy, and he's like, look, you just say to me, it's like, hey, guess what? I got a car for you, and I got a truck for you. You can go bring back the agaves in a truck, and you don't have to go by donkey.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my God, you know.
Okay,
like,
let's do that.
That's pretty amazing. You know what I mean? Like that would be really cool. Like I can do one run,
and
that's it, and put it into a truck, and I come
modernization is not that bad of a thing.
No,
it's really not.
No, it's just a lot, and modernization in you know, you only in bits and pieces. Like you have to be careful.
Yeah, exactly.
Not to go into like, you know, not to criticize tequila, but like into the more industrial side. That then you're stripping a lot of flavors and character and life away from what tequila once was.
Absolutely.
And that's where the line is that you have to be
and we got,
you know,
we had so much more that we'll have to talk about over time and stuff, man, especially if you come into town. But it's really been a pleasure. But I got one last question for you.
Yeah.
And, of course, we could talk about this topic for a long time. And in a good way, positive way, you know. But let's say you're sipping the Puebla, the Mezcal de Leyenda Puebla, right? With anyone, living or deceased, who would you love to, I don't know, you could take this table, you could take the bar, but just sip and have a conversation with?
You know, it's funny you ask because I just right now on the plane I was watching it's like a documentary show about bartenders, and it was Richard McMahon, the guy who did the cocktail book bar. He's from Germany.
Okay.
And I'd never heard about him. I'm new to kind of the industry. And so he was kind of all around New York, and he was interviewing all these, like, you know, Sasha Petrasky and Julie Reiner and all the ones. And then he went to Cuba, and then he went to Japan. And in Cuba, of course, they were talking about Ernest Hemingway and the daiquiri. Yeah. And I was like, you know, and I was like, I forget how much of a drunk he was and how much he enjoyed that, I think. And they were talking about, like, he knew if he went to this one bar, he could get his daiquiri, and it would take 20 minutes to get to the other bar, La Floridita. And when he get there, he'd always get it, like, it'd be finished, and he'd be ready for his other one. Yeah. That I think it would be amazing to sit back and have some, you know, like mezcal daiquiris with Ernest Hemingway. I think.
Yeah, I think it'd be great. I don't want to take a punch. Do you know it's gonna get to that? Yeah. So, well, I'm glad, man, Danny. I'm really glad you're in town, and I can't wait to hear kind of what you got come up here with the staff training and stuff, and I can't wait to sip some mezcal with you over dinner. So, thanks so much for sitting down and chatting, man.
Thank you for having me on.
Of course, dude. We'll talk soon. Yeah,
man. Yeah,
likewise.
Take care.
So there we have it, a brilliant chef and Mezcal purveyor, Mr. Danny Mena. What do you guys think? Pretty great dude, right? Sitting down, chatting with him. And it's funny because there are a lot of really, really, would you say, popular or visible people in the narrative of agave. And Danny kind of does this thing. You know, he does it in the background in some sense. Not a lot of social media presence, but the marks from Mezcales de Leyenda are all very interesting and all very delicious. You have stuff from Guerrero, one of the few that is in the States. You've got Puebla, which is absolutely amazing. San Luis Potosí, that alien-like cheesiness that you only get from that state. So it's a brilliant collection of mezcales, and if you get a chance to try them, please do. So thanks everybody for listening to Show to V with Mike G. No matter how fast you are binging through both Futurama and 30 Rock, or if you're thinking, man, Halloween is just around the corner, how excited am I? Please keep dancing.